The snow had been falling for 3 hours now. Nova barely felt the cold anymore. Her knees pressed into the frozen ground, the thin ceremonial dress they had forced her to wear, offering no protection against the Montana winter. She kept her eyes down, watching small flakes of snow melt against her pale skin, because looking up meant seeing them. The wolves. The circle of death slowly closes around her. This was the ancient law, the Provalupi, the trial of wolves. When an Omega was rejected by their destined mate during the sacred bonding ceremony, the pack had to decide if she deserved to live, not with words or votes, but with teeth and instinct. If the wolves attacked, she died. If they retreated, she would be cast out, marked as rejected, and left to survive alone in the wilderness. Nova had always known she was different, weaker than the other Omegas, smaller, quieter. Her wolf had never fully emerged, never given her the strength that even the lowest Omega should possess. When Mason, the beta she had been matched with since childhood, stood before the entire Silver Oak pack and spoke the words of rejection, she had not been surprised. Humiliated, devastated, but not surprised. I, Mason of the Silver Oak pack, reject you, Nova, as my mate. You are not worthy of carrying my bloodline. You are not worthy of this pack. The words still echoed in her mind as she knelt in the snow, surrounded by 12 of the pack's most vicious enforcers in their wolf forms. She could hear them breathing, see their eyes glowing in the dim twilight, smell their hunger for violence. Some of them had always hated her. Now they had permission to act on it. Her grandfather had told her stories about the trial of wolves when she was young. How in the old days it was meant to be merciful, a quick death for those too weak to survive rejection. But over the centuries it had become sport, entertainment. The pack would gather to watch, placing bets on how long the rejected Omega would last, whether she would beg or stay silent, whether the wolves would make it quick or draw it out. Nova had chosen silence. She would not give them the satisfaction of her screams. The largest wolf, a scarred gray beast named Rurik, took a step closer. His lips pulled back from his fangs, a low growl rumbling from his chest. The others began to move in sync, tightening the circle. This was it. They had made their decision. She was going to die. Nova closed her eyes and thought of her grandfather, the only person who had ever loved her. He had died 2 winters ago, and Nova had been alone ever since. Maybe this was better. Maybe death was kinder than living as a rejected Omega, scorned and broken. His final words came back to her now, whispered on his deathbed as he pressed the silver moon pendant into her palm. You will suffer, child, but that is how fate prepares you for a greater destiny. Remember who you are. The growling grew louder. She could feel their presence so close now that their breath created small clouds of condensation in the frozen air. She braced herself for the pain, for the feeling of teeth sinking into her flesh. But it did not come. Instead, the growling stopped abruptly, completely. The sudden silence was so absolute that Nova could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She opened her eyes slowly, confused. The wolves had frozen, not retreated but stopped mid-motion, as if an invisible force had turned them to stone. Their ears were pinned back, their tails low, their bodies trembling, not with aggression, but with submission, with fear. Nova felt it then, a presence so powerful it made the air itself feel heavy. The temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees and the snow began to fall harder, faster, as if the sky itself was reacting to something unnatural. She turned her head slowly, following the wolf's line of sight. He stood at the edge of the clearing, barely visible through the falling snow. Tall, impossibly tall, with silver hair that seemed to glow against the darkness. He wore no coat despite the freezing temperature. Just dark clothes that looked like they belonged to royalty. But it was his eyes that made Nova's breath catch in her throat. They were not the golden amber of a normal wolf. They were silver, pure, brilliant silver that seemed to pierce through the darkness and see everything. The Alpha King. Nova had never seen him before, had only heard whispers and legends. The most powerful werewolf in the Northern Territories. A king who ruled over dozens of packs, who could kill with a thought, and whose very presence made alphas bow. He never visited small packs like Silver Oak. There was no reason for him to be here. Yet here he was, standing in silence, watching her. The wolves in the circle began to back away, whimpering, their bravado completely gone. Even Rorik, the most vicious of them all, lowered his head and retreated, his tail tucked between his legs. Within seconds, the circle had broken, the wolves scattering into the forest, leaving Nova alone on her knees in the snow. The Alpha King moved. He did not walk. He glided silent, his death graceful as a predator. He crossed the clearing until he stood directly in front of her. Up close, he was even more terrifying. His face was sharp and cold, carved from ice and cruelty, and his silver eyes looked down at her with an expression she could not read. Nova tried to lower her gaze to show submission as she had been taught, but she found she could not look away. Something in those eyes held her captive, demanded her attention, refused to let her hide. "Stand," he said. His voice was quiet, barely more than a whisper, but it carried absolute authority. Nova's body obeyed before her mind could process the command. She stood on shaking legs, her bare feet numb from the cold, her dress soaked through and clinging to her skin. He studied her in silence, his gaze traveling over her face, her body lingering on places that made her cheeks burn despite the cold. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like he could see every secret she had ever kept, every weakness she had ever hidden. "What is your name?" he asked. "Nova," she whispered, her voice cracking from disuse and cold. "Nova of no pack." Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or recognition. She could not tell. "Who rejected you?" "Mason, Beta of the Silver Oak Pack. He had every right to. I am weak. I am not worthy of—" "Silence," the command cracked through the air like a whip. Nova's mouth snapped shut, her heart racing. She had said something wrong. She was going to die anyway, just by a king's hand instead of wolves' teeth. But he did not strike her. Instead, he took a step closer. So close that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the scent of winter pine, and something ancient and powerful that made her broken silent wolf stir for the first time in years. "You are not weak," he said, his voice dropping even lower. "You have been suppressed. There is a difference." Nova blinked, confused. I don't understand." He reached out, then slowly giving her time to flinch away if she wanted to. When she did not move, his hand came to rest against the side of her neck, his fingers cool against her freezing skin. The moment he touched her, something inside Nova's chest exploded. It was not pain, it was recognition. A bond snapping into place with such force that she gasped, her knees nearly buckling. She could feel him, not just his physical presence, but his emotions, his power, his very soul intertwining with hers. The mate bond. But that was impossible. She had been rejected. The bond with Mason had been severed. She should never feel this again. Unless Mason had never been her true mate at all. "No," she breathed, shaking her head. This cannot be real." The Alpha King's lips curved into something that might have been a smile, but there was no warmth in it. Only dark satisfaction. "You are mine," he said simply. "You have always been mine. And anyone who told you otherwise will answer to me." Before Nova could respond, before she could even process what he was saying, the sound of footsteps crunching through snow made them both turn. A group of wolves emerged from the forest, returning to human form as they approached. At the front was Mason, her former betrothed, his face pale with shock. Behind him was Alpha Thaddeus of the Silver Oak Pack, an older man with gray streaking his dark hair. They both dropped to one knee immediately, heads bowed. "Your Majesty," Alpha Thaddeus said, his voice shaking, "we had no idea you would be gracing us with your presence. If you had known, you would have what—" The king interrupted, his voice still quiet but now carrying an edge of violence that made everyone in the clearing flinch. "Hidden your barbaric traditions, pretended you do not force rejected Omegas to kneel in the snow, while your wolves decide whether to tear them apart." "It is the old law, Your Majesty," Thaddeus said carefully. "The prova lupi has been practiced for centuries. We were simply following." "The old law is abolished," the king said. "As of this moment, any pack that attempts the trial of wolves will be disbanded and their alpha executed. Is that clear?" Silence. Then quickly, "Yes, Your Majesty, perfectly clear." The king's attention shifted to Mason, who was still kneeling, his head down. "You rejected her." It was not a question, but Mason answered anyway. "Yes, Your Majesty, I had the right to." "You had no right," the king said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Because she was never yours to reject. She carries the bloodline of the Moon-Blessed. She is descended from the first wolves, the ancient ones who walked these lands before packs existed. That is why her wolf has been silent. The power is too great for her to access without proper training, without someone strong enough to guide her through the awakening. Nova's mind was reeling. Moon-blessed ancient bloodline. She was nobody, the weakest Omega in the pack. How could any of this be true, Your Majesty? Alpha Thaddeus said hesitantly. If I may, the girl's family has been in this pack for generations. Her grandfather never mentioned any. Her grandfather was protecting her. The king interrupted. The moon-blessed have been hunted to extinction by those who fear their power. Do you think he would announce it to a pack that would see his granddaughter as a threat? He paused, his silver eyes returning to Nova. But he told you stories, did he not? Taught you the old language? Gave you a necklace with a moon symbol that you were instructed never to remove. Nova's hand instinctively went to her throat where her grandfather's necklace hung beneath the soaked dress. She had never taken it off, even though she did not fully understand why grandfather had made her promise to keep it hidden. How do you know this? She whispered. The king's expression softened just slightly. Because I have been searching for you for 5 years, since the moment I became king and gained access to the old records, the genealogies that track the ancient bloodlines. I knew you existed. I knew you were out here somewhere hidden and unaware of what you truly are. And when I felt the shift in the bond tonight, when I felt your life in danger through the bond that had not even fully formed yet, I came. He turned back to Mason and Alpha Thaddeus, and the softness vanished, replaced by cold fury. You tried to kill my mate. You put her through a death trial because you were too ignorant to recognize what she is. Give me one reason why I should not burn this entire pack to the ground. The clearing fell silent. Even the wind seemed to still waiting for the answer. Alpha Thaddeus looked gray, his hands shaking. Mason had gone completely white, his eyes wide with terror. Mercy, Your Majesty, Thaddeus finally said, his voice breaking. We did not know. We would never have. Ignorance is not innocence, the king said, but I will offer you a choice. Swear fealty to me directly. Disband the Silver Oak Pack and become part of the Northern Crown Pack. You will be retrained, re-educated, and any member who refuses to abandon the old barbaric ways will be exiled, or refuse and face execution. What will it be? We swear fealty, Thaddeus said, immediately pressing his forehead to the snow. The Silver Oak Pack is yours, Your Majesty. We are yours. The others, including Mason, quickly followed suit, repeating the words of fealty. Nova watched it all in stunned silence, unable to process the enormity of what was happening. Her entire world had been torn apart and rebuilt in the span of minutes. Mason spoke up, then his voice trembling. Your Majesty, we only did as the Hunters' Council commanded. They knew a moon-blessed was here. The king went still, his silver eyes locking onto Mason with terrible intensity. Explain. Mason swallowed hard. 3 months ago, a representative from the Hunters' Council came to our village. He said they had detected an anomaly in our territory, a potential moon-blessed. They ordered us to test all young females through rejection rituals to see if any showed unusual power under stress. We were told it was for the protection of all packs. Protection, the king repeated the word, dripping with contempt. The hunters have never protected our kind. They have only slaughtered us. Nova struggled to follow. The hunter. Another enemy she knew nothing about. The king turned to her, his expression grave. We must leave, now. If the hunters know of your existence, they will come for you. He removed his cloak and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was heavy and warm and smelled like him, pine and snow and something wild and ancient. What is your name? She asked quietly as he began to lead her away from the clearing, away from the pack that had tried to kill her. I know you are the Alpha King, but what is your name? He glanced down at her, and for the first time she saw a real smile cross his face. It transformed him, made him look less like a terrifying force of nature and more like a man. A dangerously handsome man, but still a man. Magnus, he said. My name is Magnus, and you, Nova of the Moon Blessed, are going to be my queen. The journey to Magnus's territory took less than a day, traveling through mountain passes and dense forests until they reached the heart of the Northern Crown Packlands. Nova had never been this far from Silver Oak territory, had never seen anything beyond the small valley where she had spent her entire life. The world was so much bigger than she had imagined, and she felt smaller with every mile they traveled. Magnus did not speak much during the journey. He sat beside her in the back of the sleek black SUV, his attention mostly focused on various documents and reports that his advisors kept bringing him at every stop. But his hand never left hers. Even when he was reading or speaking to others, his fingers remained intertwined with hers, a constant reminder of the bond between them. Nova spent most of the journey staring out the window, trying to process everything that had happened. According to Magnus, she was descended from the moon, blessed an ancient bloodline of wolves with extraordinary power. Her grandfather had hidden her to keep her safe from those who would hunt her, and Magnus, through some miracle or fate, had found her just in time. But why had her grandfather never told her? Why had he let her grow up thinking she was broken and weak? The questions spun through her mind, unanswered and unanswerable now that grandfather was gone. He was protecting you, Magnus said suddenly as if reading her thoughts. Perhaps he was through the bond. The moon-blessed were nearly hunted to extinction centuries ago. The few survivors went into hiding, blending into regular packs, suppressing their abilities, passing as ordinary wolves. What makes them so dangerous? What makes me so dangerous that I would need to be hidden? Magnus's eyes met hers, silver and ancient. Power. The kind of power that could threaten those who rule through fear rather than respect. The moon-blessed can communicate directly with the moon spirit. They can influence other wolves' minds. Some say they can even call upon the spirits of the dead. Nova thought of her silent wolf, the weakness she had always felt, the shame of being different. But I have no power. My wolf has barely spoken to me my entire life. Because your grandfather bound it, Magnus explained. It was the only way to keep you safe, to make you appear ordinary, weak even. The binding ritual dampens your abilities, makes your wolf dormant, but it cannot erase what you are. And now with proper training, you will awaken. Before she could ask more questions, the SUV slowed. They had reached a mountainside that appeared solid and impenetrable, covered in pines and boulders. But as they approached, a hidden road appeared winding up the steep terrain. Welcome to Northern Crown, Magnus said as they turned onto the hidden path. They climbed higher and higher, the forest giving way to stone, until finally they rounded a bend and Nova saw it. A fortress carved into the side of the mountain with massive stone walls and towers that reached toward the sky. Wolves patrolled the battlements, and she could feel the power radiating from the place, ancient and unbreakable. This is your home now, Magnus said as they passed through the main gates. You are safe here. No one will ever hurt you again. As they stepped from the vehicle, a commotion erupted. Guards rushed forward, surrounding them with urgency. Your Majesty, one said, his expression grim. Hunters attacked the eastern village, 20 dead, including children. Magnus's face hardened. Just hours ago, they used new weapons, silver gas that paralyzes even in human form. Nova felt Magnus's rage through the bond, a cold fury that made her shiver. They're growing bolder, he said, or more desperate. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air. Nova turned to see a woman running toward them, her clothes torn, blood streaming from a wound on her arm. They're coming, she gasped, collapsing at Magnus's feet. The hunters. They followed me. They know she's here. Magnus's hand tightened around Nova's. Through the bond, she felt his concerns spike into something close to fear, though his face remained impassive. Get her inside, he ordered, and guards moved to lift the injured woman. Lock down the fortress. No one enters or leaves without my direct command. As they hurried toward the massive doors of the inner keep, Nova saw movement in the trees below. Vehicles with bright headlights winding up the mountain road they had just traveled. They're here already, Magnus said grimly. They must have been tracking us since Silver Oak. Once inside, Magnus led Nova through corridors of polished stone past tapestries, depicting great battles and legendary wolves. Guards and servants bowed as they passed, eyeing Nova with curious, sometimes hostile glances. They don't trust me, she whispered. They don't know you, Magnus corrected, but they will. They reached a grand hall where warriors were already gathering, strapping on weapons and armor. Magnus approached an older man with a scarred face and white beard who stood at a large stone table covered in maps. Solomon, Magnus said, the hunters have tracked us from Silver Oak. The old man looked up, his eyes sharp despite his age. When his gaze fell on Nova, he went completely still. By the moon, he whispered, you found her. I did, Magnus confirmed. This is Nova, the last of the moon-blessed. Solomon's weathered face showed a complex mix of emotions, awe, fear, hope. He studied her so intently that Nova had to fight the urge to step back. Not the last, Solomon said finally, but perhaps the strongest I have ever sensed. He approached Nova slowly, his movements stiff with age. When he was just a few feet away, he sank to one knee before her head bowed. I have waited 200 years to see another of your kind, he said. May I? He reached toward her, his hand hovering near her face. Nova glanced at Magnus, who nodded slightly. She turned back to Solomon and nodded her permission. The old man's fingers touched her cheek, all cool and dry. His eyes closed and he drew in a sharp breath. Yes, he murmured. The bloodline is pure, descended from Lunara herself. He opened his eyes and looked directly into hers. Be careful, girl. Your power could save us all, but it could also destroy everything. Before Nova could ask what he meant, the doors burst open. A woman strode in, tall and imposing, dressed in combat gear, with weapons strapped to her belt and thigh. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe braid, and her golden eyes scanned the room with military precision before landing on Magnus. Your Majesty, she said, inclining her head slightly, the hunters have established a perimeter around the mountain. They're not attacking yet, just waiting. Victoria, Magnus acknowledged. How many? At least 50, maybe more in the trees. They brought their new silver weapons. Victoria's gaze shifted to Nova, her expression hardening. So this is her, the one they're after. This is Nova, Magnus said, his tone carrying a warning. My mate and your future queen. Victoria's eyes widened fractionally, the only sign of her surprise. Your mate, but she's... Choose your next words very carefully, Victoria, Magnus said softly. Victoria pressed her lips into a thin line, then bowed stiffly. As you command, Your Majesty. What are your orders regarding the hunters? Double the guards, prepare for siege, but do not engage unless they attack first. And Victoria nodded toward Nova. She stays with me. Victoria looked like she wanted to argue, but thought better of it. She bowed again and left her posture rigid with disapproval. She doesn't like me, Nova observed. Victoria doesn't like anyone, Magnus replied. She's my beta, my chief enforcer. Trust comes slowly to her, but she is loyal to the death. Solomon rose shakily to his feet. The girl needs protection and training. The hunters would not commit so many resources unless they truly feared what she might become. I know, Magnus said, but first she needs rest. She's been through an ordeal. He turned to Nova. Come, I'll show you to your rooms. They left the hall, walking deeper into the fortress. The corridors grew quieter, the stone walls giving way to wood paneling and rich tapestries. Finally, they reached a heavy wooden door carved with images of wolves and the moon. Magnus pushed it open to reveal a suite of rooms larger than the entire house she had shared with her grandfather. The bedroom alone was enormous, with a four-poster bed piled high with furs and a fireplace already crackling with warmth. Rest, Magnus said, releasing her hand for the first time since they left the clearing. You've been through an ordeal. Solomon will come to check on you, and then tomorrow we will begin your training. Training to awaken your wolf, to teach you how to access the power that has been dormant inside you all your life. It will not be easy, but I will be with you every step of the way. He turned to leave, but Nova found herself reaching out, catching his sleeve. He stopped, looking back at her with those penetrating silver eyes. Why? She asked softly. Why did you search for me? Why do you care about a bloodline that was hunted to extinction? What do you want from me? For a long moment, Magnus said nothing. Then he stepped closer, lifting his hand to cup her face with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his fearsome reputation. I want nothing from you except what you freely give, he said quietly. But I will tell you this, Nova. The moment I read your name in those ancient records, the moment I confirmed you existed, my wolf knew we were meant to find each other. And when I felt you in danger tonight, when I felt your despair and resignation through the bond that had not even fully formed yet, I would have torn through armies to reach you. So do not ask me why I care. The answer is simple. You are mine, and I protect what is mine. His thumb brushed across her cheek, wiping away a tear she had not realized had fallen. Then he stepped back, his expression returning to its usual controlled mask. Sleep, Nova. Tomorrow your real life begins. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Nova stood alone in the enormous room, trying to comprehend the fact that she was no longer a rejected Omega, waiting to die in the snow. She was the mate of the Alpha King descendant of an ancient bloodline, and apparently destined for something far greater than she had ever imagined. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called hesitantly. The door opened to reveal a small boy, no more than 10 years old, with silver-streaked black hair and Magnus's sharp features. He stood in the doorway watching her with cautious blue eyes. "Who are you?" Nova asked gently. "Caleb," the boy had said. "Magnus is my father." Nova felt a jolt of surprise. No one had mentioned that Magnus had a son. "It's nice to meet you, Caleb." The boy studied her with an intensity beyond his years. "Are you really moon-blessed?" "So they tell me," Nova replied, "though I'm still not sure what that means." "It means you're special," Caleb said. My mother was special too. She died when I was 5. Nova's heart ached for the solemn child. "I'm sorry." Caleb shrugged, but she could see the pain beneath the casual gesture. "Everyone dies eventually, especially those who are special." With that cryptic statement, he turned and left, closing the door behind him. Nova sank onto the edge of the massive bed, her body finally acknowledging how exhausted she was. As she lay back against the soft furs, she could still feel Magnus's presence through the bond, a steady warmth in her chest that chased away the lingering cold. Outside her window, she could see the lights of the hunters' camp in the distance, a reminder that danger still lurked. But for the first time in years, Nova felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Dawn broke over the northern crown fortress, painting the stone walls in hues of gold and amber. Nova stood on the balcony of her chambers, watching the sun rise over the mountains. She had barely slept, her mind too full of questions, her body still humming with the energy of the mate bond. In the valley below, she could see the hunters' camp. They had not advanced during the night, but they had not retreated either. Waiting, watching. Their presence was a constant reminder that whatever peace she had found here was tenuous at best. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, turning from the view. Solomon entered, his weathered face solemn. He carried a wooden box inlaid with silver and moonstone. "It is time," he said simply. "The Alpha King awaits you in the training grounds." Nova followed the old man through the fortress, down winding staircases and through corridors she had not seen the night before. Everywhere they went, wolves stopped to stare at her, some with curiosity, others with undisguised hostility. "They fear what they do not understand," Solomon said, noticing her discomfort. "And what they fear they hate." "And what am I exactly?" Nova asked. "Yesterday I was nothing. Today everyone looks at me like I'm either a savior or a monster." Solomon glanced back at her, his ancient eyes sharp. "Perhaps you are both. The moon-blessed are not simply wolves with special powers. They are conduits for the moon's will. They can hear the voices of the dead, calm the rage of the living, and if the legends are true, even call forth the spirits of our ancestors." "That sounds like a fairy tale." "All fairy tales began as truth," Solomon replied. "Your grandfather knew this. It is why he bound your wolf, to keep you hidden from those who would use you or destroy you." They reached a heavy iron door that opened onto a private clearing surrounded by towering pines. The morning mist still clung to the ground, giving the space an otherworldly quality. Magnus stood in the center barefoot, despite the cold, wearing only dark training pants. His torso was bare, revealing a body sculpted by centuries of battle, marked with scars that told stories of countless fights. Nova felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the mate bond and everything to do with the simple fact that Magnus was breathtakingly beautiful. Dangerous, yes, but beautiful in the way that all apex predators are beautiful. He turned as they approached, his silver eyes finding hers immediately. "You came," he said, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Did you think I would run?" A small smile touched his lips. "The thought occurred to me. Many would given your circumstances." "I have nowhere to run to," Nova replied honestly. "And even if I did, those hunters would find me. At least here I might learn how to defend myself." Magnus nodded, pleased with her answer. "Solomon, the preparations." The old man placed the wooden box on a stone altar at the edge of the clearing and opened it, revealing an array of silver tools and vials of colored liquids. "All is ready, Your Majesty, but I must warn you again, this is dangerous. Her wolf has been bound for so long. The awakening could be volatile." "I am aware of the risks," Magnus said firmly, "but we have no choice. The hunters grow bolder by the day, and we need her power awakened if we are to survive what's coming." What exactly is coming? Nova asked, a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air running down her spine. Magnus and Solomon exchanged a look. War, Magnus said simply. The hunters have always hunted our kind, but in secret in shadows. Now they grow more open, more aggressive. The attack on the eastern village was their most brazen yet. They no longer fear exposure to the human world. Because they have new weapons, Solomon added. Weapons that can identify us even in human form. Weapons that can paralyze us with silver gas. If they continue to advance at this rate within months, no wolf will be safe anywhere. Nova swallowed hard. And you think I can help stop this? Me, I couldn't even make my own pack accept me. That was before, Magnus said, stepping closer to her. Now it is time to discover who you truly are. He led her to the center of the clearing, positioning her so that the rising sun fell directly on her face. The reason your wolf has been silent is because the moon-blessed power is too intense for an untrained Omega to control, Magnus explained. Your body has been suppressing it instinctively to protect you from burning out. But that suppression has made you appear weak when in reality you are anything but. How do we fix it? Nova asked. We do not fix it. We teach you to control it. He moved behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. Close your eyes. Feel the bond between us. Use it as an anchor. Nova obeyed, closing her eyes and focusing inward. The bond was easy to find, a golden thread of connection that ran from her chest to his. The moment she focused on it, it flared brighter, and she felt Magnus's presence more clearly than ever, his strength, his confidence, his absolute certainty that she could do this. Now reach deeper, he instructed, his voice low and soothing. Pass the bond down into the place where your wolf sleeps. She is there, Nova. She has always been there. You just need to wake her. Nova had tried this before countless times over the years, always with the same result. Nothing, just empty silence where her wolf should be. But this time, with Magnus's hands on her shoulders and the bond humming between them, she felt something different. A flicker, a spark of awareness that had never been there before. I feel something, she whispered. Good. Do not force it. Just let her know you are ready. Let her know it is safe to emerge. Nova focused on that flicker, on the tiny spark of consciousness that felt both foreign and familiar. She reached toward it, not with force, but with welcome, with acceptance. And slowly, so slowly, it began to grow. The sensation was overwhelming. Power flooded through her body, raw and ancient, and so intense that she gasped, her eyes flying open. Her skin began to glow with a soft, silver light, and she could feel her bones shifting, her muscles strengthening, her senses sharpening to an impossible degree. But there was something else. Voices, whispers at the edge of her consciousness. Hundreds of them, speaking words she could almost understand. I hear them, she gasped, her voice strange even to her own ears. I hear voices. Magnus's grip on her shoulders tightened. Who do you hear? Everyone, no one, I don't know. Nova struggled to make sense of the whispers. They're all around us, in the trees, in the stones, in the air itself. The spirits, Solomon breathed from somewhere nearby. She can hear the ancestors. One voice rose above the others, familiar and beloved. Grandfather, Nova whispered, tears springing to her eyes. Yes, the voice answered in her mind. I am here, child. I have always been here watching over you. Why? She asked aloud, forgetting that the others could not hear what she heard. Why did you bind my wolf? Why did you let me believe I was broken? To protect you, her grandfather's voice replied. Until he found you, until you were ready. The power was building now, a crescendo that threatened to overwhelm her. She could feel her control slipping, the wolf within her surging forward with too much force. Magnus, she gasped, I cannot. It is too much. His arms came around her immediately, pulling her back against his chest. Yes, you can. You are moon-blessed Nova. This power is your birthright. Breathe, focus on my voice. Focus on the bond. Use me as your anchor. She grabbed onto the bond like a lifeline, pouring the excess power into it, letting it flow from her into him and back again in a stable circuit. The panic began to fade, replaced by a sense of balance. The power was still there, still immense, but now it felt manageable, controlled. Better? Magnus asked. Nova nodded, not trusting her voice. She could feel her wolf now fully present and aware for the first time in her life. It was glorious. It was terrifying. It was everything she had never known she was missing. The sound of running footsteps interrupted the moment. Nova's eyes snapped open to see a young guard burst into the clearing, his face pale with urgency. "Your Majesty," he gasped, dropping to one knee. "Forgive the interruption, but there is a situation. The child, your son, he was playing near the eastern wall. He's gone. We cannot find him anywhere." Magnus went rigid against her, his hands falling from her shoulders. Through the bond, Nova felt a spike of pure, cold fear. "Caleb, my son is missing." "Yes, Your Majesty. Victoria has organized search parties, but..." "But what?" Magnus's voice was deadly quiet. The guard swallowed hard. "There are signs of struggle at the eastern wall, and this was found." He held out his hand, revealing a small silver dart. "Hunter technology," Solomon said grimly. "A tracking device, most likely." Magnus's control shattered. His eyes blazed silver, his body trembling with barely contained rage and fear. "Find him!" he roared, and the guard flinched back. "Turn this mountain upside down. If he is still within these walls, I want him found. Now!" The guard scrambled to his feet and ran back toward the fortress. Nova felt Magnus's emotions through the bond, chaotic and raw. Guilt, fear, rage. "He came to see me last night," she said softly. "Caleb, he asked if I was really moon-blessed. He said his mother was special too, and that she died." Magnus's gaze snapped to her sharp with surprise. "He spoke to you. Caleb rarely speaks to anyone. He seemed lonely, sad. His mother, my former mate, was murdered by hunters 5 years ago." Magnus said, his voice tight with old pain. "Since then, Caleb has withdrawn into himself. I have tried to reach him, but..." He broke off, his face hardening into a mask of determination. "I need to find my son." "I'll help," Nova said without hesitation. "I can help." "No, you will stay here with Solomon. Continue your training. You are not ready for combat yet." "But that is an order, Nova." His voice brooked no argument. "I cannot risk losing you both." Before she could protest further, he strode from the clearing, his entire body radiating lethal purpose. Nova turned to Solomon, her newly awakened wolf bristling at being left behind. "I can't just stay here while a child is in danger, especially not Magnus's son." Solomon regarded her thoughtfully. "No, I don't suppose you can. The maternal instinct of a newly mated female wolf is quite powerful, particularly when it comes to her mate's offspring. It's not just instinct, it's right. If I have these powers, I should use them to help. And how do you propose to do that when you've only just awakened your wolf?" Nova thought for a moment, remembering the voices she had heard. The spirits, the ancestors, her grandfather. "The voices," she said slowly. "If I can hear the spirits, maybe they can help us find Caleb. They see everything, don't they?" Solomon's eyes widened. "Theoretically, yes, but communing with spirits is advanced magic even for a moon-blessed. It takes years of training to..." "We don't have years," Nova interrupted. "We have minutes. Caleb is in danger now." She closed her eyes, focusing inward again, finding that place where the voices whispered. This time, instead of being overwhelmed by them, she called to them specifically. "Help me," she projected the thought as clearly as she could. "A child is missing. Caleb, son of Magnus. He is in danger. Please help me find him." The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Images flashed through her mind, too fast to process. Trees, stone, water, darkness. "Slow down," she murmured. "I can't see." The images slowed, coalescing into a single vision. A hidden cave, a small stream flowing from it, and Caleb unconscious, being carried by 2 men in black tactical gear. Nova's eyes flew open. "I know where he is. There's a cave east of here, with a stream flowing from it." "The hunters have him." Solomon stared at her in astonishment. "The spirit cave. It's about a mile east of the fortress. But how did you..." "No time. We need to go now." "But Magnus ordered you to stay here." Nova's newly awakened wolf surged forward, her eyes flashing silver. "And I am choosing to disobey that order to save his son. Are you coming or not?" Solomon's weathered face broke into a smile that made him look decades younger. Well, perhaps you are queen material after all. Come, I know a shortcut." They moved swiftly through the fortress, avoiding the main halls where Magnus and his warriors would be organizing the search. Solomon led her to a small door hidden behind a tapestry, revealing a narrow tunnel carved into the rock. The old escape route, he explained, forgotten by most. It will lead us directly to the eastern slopes. As they hurried through the tunnel, Nova studied Solomon more carefully. There was something about the old wolf that didn't quite fit. His knowledge was too specific, his manner too precise. "You weren't always part of the Northern Crown's pack, were you?" she asked as they emerged from the tunnel into the cool mountain air. Solomon gave her a sharp look. "What makes you say that?" "Just a feeling, the way you talk about wolves, about hunters. It's like you understand both sides." The old man was silent for a long moment as they made their way through the dense forest following the eastern slope downward. "No," he finally said, "I was not always part of this pack. In fact, I was not always a wolf." Nova nearly stumbled. "What?" Solomon pushed up his sleeve, revealing a tattoo on his wrist that she had glimpsed briefly the day before. A stylized crosshair with a wolf's head in the center. "I was a hunter," he said quietly, "for nearly a century, one of their best." Nova stopped in her tracks, her newly awakened wolf bristling with aggression. "You hunted wolves. You hunted my kind." "Yes, until I met your grandmother." The revelation hit Nova like a physical blow. "My grandmother, Lyra, she was moon-blessed like you. I was sent to kill her. Instead, she showed me the truth about wolves, about the balance between human and beast. She spared my life when she could have taken it. And in doing so, she changed me forever." What happened to her, I never knew her. A shadow of old pain crossed Solomon's face. "She was killed by other hunters, but not before she gave birth to your mother, who inherited her gift. When the hunters came for them both, your grandfather took your mother and ran. I helped them hide, turning against my former brethren. And now you help Magnus. I help all wolves. It is my atonement." Nova digested this information, uncertain how to feel about it. This man had hunted her kind, had perhaps killed wolves like her. And yet he had also helped save her family, had helped Magnus find her. The sound of running water interrupted her thoughts. They had reached a small clearing, and ahead, just as she had seen in the vision, was the mouth of a cave with a stream flowing from it. "The spirit cave," Solomon whispered. "They are inside with the boy." Nova reached out with her newly enhanced senses. She could smell unfamiliar humans, hear their heartbeats. 4 of them, and a smaller, slower heartbeat. "Caleb. He's alive," she said with a relief, "but his heartbeat is weak. We need to move now." "We should wait for Magnus," Solomon cautioned. "These are trained hunters with weapons designed to kill our kind." But Nova was already moving her wolf, pushing her forward, driven by a protective instinct she hadn't known she possessed. "Stay here if you want," she said over her shoulder. "I'm going in." She crept toward the cave entrance, staying low and silent, as Magnus had taught her earlier that morning. The stream provided cover for any sound she might make, and the cave mouth was wide enough that some light penetrated the interior. Inside, she could see 4 men in tactical gear, their faces hidden behind masks. They were gathered around a small form on the ground. Caleb. He appeared unconscious, his small body far too still. Rage surged through Nova, hot and unfamiliar. Her wolf pushed against her skin, demanding release, demanding blood. But she forced herself to think rationally. 4 armed hunters against 1 newly awakened wolf were not good odds, no matter how powerful her bloodline might be. She needed a distraction. Closing her eyes, she reached for the voices again, the spirits that seemed to permeate this place. "Help me," she thought desperately. "Help me save the child." The response was immediate and unexpected. The temperature in the cave plummeted. The stream froze solid in an instant, and the walls began to glitter with frost. The hunters looked around in confusion, their breath fogging in the suddenly freezing air. "What the hell?" one of them muttered. "Equipment malfunction," another said, checking a device on his wrist. "The silver dispersion unit is—" He never finished the sentence. The shadows in the cave began to move, coalescing into wolf-like forms, insubstantial, but clearly visible. Spirit wolves, dozens of them, circling the hunters, snarling silently. The men backed together, raising their weapons. "What is this?" one shouted. "Some kind of hologram." "It's her," the leader said, his voice tight with fear and excitement. "The moon blessed. She's here." Nova took that as her cue. She stepped into the cave entrance, letting her power flow freely, now her skin glowing with silver light, her eyes transformed to pure luminescence. Leave the she commanded, her voice echoing with unnatural resonance. Leave now, and you may live. The hunters hesitated, clearly unnerved by her appearance and the spirit wolves. But their leader stepped forward, a cruel smile visible even behind his mask. We came for the boy as bait, he said, but catching you is the real prize. He raised a weapon, a sleek silver gun that hummed with energy. Nova had no idea what it did, but instinct told her to avoid finding out. She dropped to the ground as he fired a burst of silver gas exploding where she had been standing. The spirit wolves attacked, then passing through the hunters' bodies like cold wind, disrupting their movements, making them clumsy and disoriented. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Nova to dart forward, reaching Caleb. The boy was pale, a small puncture wound on his neck, showing where they had drugged him. His pulse was steady but slow. She needed to get him out of here. Give me strength, she whispered to the spirits, to her ancestors, to her grandfather. Power surged through her again, different this time, focused and controlled. She scooped Caleb into her arms, surprised at how light he felt, and turned to run. But the leader of the hunters was there, blocking her path, his weapon aimed at her chest. You're coming with us, he said. Both of you. The boy is insurance that his father won't do anything stupid. I don't think so, came a voice from behind Nova. Solomon stepped into the cave, his aged frame suddenly straight and imposing. He raised his hand, revealing a small black device. Remember this, Commander Pierce, your own technology turned against you. The hunter leader stiffened. Solomon, you traitorous bastard. Solomon pressed a button on the device. The silver weapons in the hunter's hands sparked and died, rendered useless. Run, Nova, Solomon ordered. Get the boy to safety. I'll handle this. But go now. Nova hesitated only a second before turning and sprinting from the cave, Caleb clutched tightly in her arms. Behind her, she heard the sounds of combat, of Solomon engaging the hunters. She hated leaving him, but Caleb's safety had to come first. She ran through the forest, following her instincts and the pull of the bond back toward the fortress. She had made it halfway up the mountain when she heard a roar of rage that could only belong to one wolf, Magnus. He appeared before her, shifted to his wolf form, a massive silver beast with glowing eyes. When he saw her carrying Caleb, he shifted back to human form in an instant, his face a storm of emotions. Is he? Magnus could not even finish the question. He's alive, Nova assured him quickly. Just drugged. The hunters took him, but we found him in time. Magnus took his son from her arms, cradling him with a tenderness that made Nova's heart ache. Through the bond, she felt his relief, his gratitude, and his confusion. He asked. I ordered you to stay in the fortress. Solomon helped me. He's still at the spirit cave fighting the hunters. Magnus's expression darkened. Victoria, he called to the female beta who had just arrived with a group of warriors. Take my son to the healers. Then gather a strike team and secure the spirit cave. Solomon is there engaging hunters. Victoria nodded, taking Caleb gently from Magnus's arms. And her? She asked, jerking her chin toward Nova. She comes with me. Magnus waited until the others were gone before turning his full attention to Nova. His face was unreadable, but through the bond, she could feel a complex mix of emotions, anger at her disobedience, relief that his son was safe, and something deeper, harder to define. Pride, perhaps. You disobeyed a direct order, he said finally. Yes. Why? Nova met his gaze steadily. Because it was the right thing to do, because Caleb needed help. Because if these powers are truly mine, then I should use them to protect those who cannot protect themselves. For a long moment, Magnus was silent, studying her face as if seeing her for the first time. The spirits helped you find him, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I can hear them, see through their eyes. They showed me where Caleb was being held. And they helped you fight the hunters. They did. Magnus shook his head slowly, amazement replacing anger. In one day you've accomplished what takes most moon-blessed years to master. Communing with spirits, channeling their power. It's unprecedented. I had motivation, Nova said simply. A child was in danger. Magnus stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her face. You risked your life for my son. Why? The question surprised her. Because he's yours. Because he's innocent. Because he needed help. Do I need more reason than that? Something in Magnus's expression softened, the last of his anger melting away. No, he said quietly. No other reason is needed. He leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, a gesture so unexpected that Nova froze for a moment before responding. The kiss was gentle, almost reverent, a stark contrast to the fierce warrior she had come to know. When he pulled back, his silver eyes were warm with an emotion she was afraid to name. Thank you, he said simply, for saving him, for being who you are. Before Nova could respond, a commotion from farther up the mountain caught their attention. Warriors were returning, and in their midst was Solomon leaning heavily on Victoria's arm, his clothing torn and bloody. Solomon. Nova broke away from Magnus and ran to the old man. Are you hurt? Solomon managed a grim smile. Nothing that won't heal. The hunters are dealt with for now, though I doubt that's the last we'll see of them. You should not have engaged them alone, Magnus said, his voice stern but concerned. I wasn't alone, Solomon replied, his eyes finding Nova's. I had the spirits with me, and it seems your mate has quite a way with them. Never seen anything like it. Magnus nodded thoughtfully. We should return to the fortress, all of us. There is much to discuss. As they made their way back, Nova felt a flicker of awareness at the edge of her consciousness. A presence different from the spirits, more focused, more malevolent. She turned, scanning the forest behind them, but saw nothing. What is it? Magnus asked, noticing her distraction. I'm not sure, Nova admitted. I felt something, someone watching us, but it's gone now. Magnus's face hardened. We are being hunted, not just by those four in the cave, but by all of them. And now they know exactly what you are capable of. Nova thought of Caleb's pale face, of the silver weapons, of the hunter leader's cruel smile. Let them come, she said, surprising herself with armed fierceness. I'm ready for them. But as they continued toward the fortress, the feeling of being watched returned stronger this time. And with it came a whisper, not from the spirits, but from someone very much alive. Sister, the voice breathed across her mind, feather-light but unmistakable. I've found you at last. Nova stumbled, caught off guard by the unfamiliar presence. Magnus steadied her, his face concerned. What is it? What's wrong? Nova shook her head, unable to explain the sudden certainty that had gripped her. I need to see my grandfather's journal, the one he left me. There's something I need to confirm. Magnus studied her face, sensing her urgency through the bond. Very well. Once we've seen to Caleb and Solomon, we'll retrieve it. Nova nodded, but her mind was racing ahead. Sister, the voice had called her sister, but that was impossible. She had no siblings. She was the last of her line. Wasn't she? The feeling of being watched faded as they approached the fortress, but the question lingered, burning in Nova's mind like an ember that refused to die out. Who had reached out to her, and more importantly, what did they want? Night had fallen over the Northern Crown Fortress, but there was no peace to be found in the darkness. Nova sat cross-legged on the floor of her chambers, surrounded by the contents of her grandfather's journal, old letters and faded photographs that Magnus had retrieved for her from the sealed box she'd brought from Silver Oak. The voice that had reached out to her in the forest still echoed in her mind. Sister, one word that had shattered everything she thought she knew about herself. Her fingers traced over a faded photograph so worn at the edges that it was beginning to disintegrate. Two identical baby girls, barely a month old, with wisps of silver-white hair and eyes that seemed too knowing for infants. On the bow, written in her grandfather's shaky hand, my precious twins, the last of our line. May the moon watch over you both. Twins, she had a twin sister. The door opened and Magnus entered, his face grave. He had spent the last hours with Caleb, who had finally awakened from the hunter's sedative, but remained withdrawn and silent, speaking to no one, not even his father. Any change? Nova asked, looking up from the scattered papers. Magnus shook his head, coming to sit beside her on the floor. The healers say he will recover physically. The rest, he trailed off, his silver eyes clouded with worry. He's strong, Nova said gently, like his father. Magnus's gaze fell to the photograph in her hand. You found something. It wasn't a question, but Nova nodded anyway. I had a twin sister. My grandfather never told me. According to his journal, we were separated at birth for our own protection. He took me, and my grandmother took her. Your grandmother, the one Solomon spoke of. Lyra, yes. Nova handed him a letter, its paper yellowed with age. This was the last letter she sent to my grandfather before she died. She says she had to hide with the child, that hunters were closing in, that she would seek refuge with an old friend. Solomon, Magnus guessed. I think so, but the letter doesn't say what happened after, whether my sister survived, whether they found safety. Magnus studied the photograph, his expression thoughtful. If she lives, she would be as powerful as you. Another moon blessed. And the voice I heard in the forest called me sister. It has to be her. Nova's hands trembled slightly. But why now? Why reach out now after all these years? Before Magnus could answer, the door burst open. Victoria stood there, her face tight with urgency. Your Majesty, the hunters, they're advancing. Magnus was on his feet in an instant. How many? All of them. At least 100. They've brought vehicles, weapons. This isn't a scouting party. This is an assault. Nova felt Magnus's shock and anger through the bond, quickly replaced by cold calculation. Sound the alarm. Gather the warriors. Evacuate the non-combatants through the western tunnels. Victoria nodded once and disappeared, already shouting orders. Magnus turned to Nova, his face set in hard lines. Stay with Caleb. The safe room behind the throne chamber will protect you both. I should fight, Nova protested. You've seen what I can do. What you can do is untested, unpredictable. And if they capture you, if they get what they want us both, Nova said quietly. Me and my sister. That's why they're attacking now. They know there are 2 Moonblessed. Magnus's eyes widened slightly. How can you be me? Because she's with them. My sister. I can feel her presence getting closer. Nova touched her chest, where the bond with Magnus pulsed steady and warm. Not like our bond, different, darker, but unmistakable. For a moment, Magnus looked torn, the king and the maid at war within him. Then he nodded once, decision made. Come with me. Both of you need to be protected. They moved swiftly through the fortress, now alive with activity, as warriors prepared for battle and others helped the young and elderly evacuate. Nova could feel the tension, the fear, but also the determination. These wolves would fight to the death for their king, for their home. They reached Caleb's chambers, where 2 guards stood at attention. Inside, the boy sat on his bed, small and pale but alert. When he saw Nova, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Relief. Father. He said, his voice barely above a whisper. They're coming for her. Magnus knelt before his son, his hands gentle on the boy's shoulders. Yes, but we will protect her. And you, I need you to come with us now to the safe room. Caleb shook his head, sudden fear in his eyes. No, not there. That's where they want us to go. Magnus frowned. What do you mean? The woman with white hair, like Nova's. She told me when they took me. She said they would drive us into the mountain's heart. That's where the trap is. Nova felt a chill run down her spine. My sister. She spoke to you, Caleb nodded. She said to tell you she's sorry, that she has no choice, that her grandfather will kill her if she doesn't help them. Her grandfather, Nova's mind raced. Who is her grandfather? Commander Pierce, Caleb whispered, the leader of the hunters. He raised her to hunt you. The revelation hit Nova like a physical blow. Her twin, raised by the very people who had hunted their kind to near extinction, used as a weapon against her own blood. A distant explosion shook the fortress, dust falling from the ceiling. They've breached the outer wall, Magnus said grimly. He looked at his son, then at Nova, calculation in his eyes. Change of plans. We don't go to the safe room. We go to Solomon. Solomon, Nova asked, confused. He knows more than he's told us. About your grandmother. About your sister. About all of this. Magnus lifted Caleb into his arms. And right now we need every advantage we can get. They moved through the fortress by hidden paths, avoiding the main corridors where warriors were rushing to defend against the hunter incursion. Nova could hear fighting now, gunfire, and the snarls of wolves, the screams of the wounded. Her newly awakened wolf bristled, wanting to join the battle to protect the pack that had given her sanctuary. Magnus led them to a small door hidden behind a tapestry, similar to the one Solomon had shown her earlier. It opened into a narrow passage that spiraled down into the mountain's depths. Where does this lead? Nova asked, following Magnus into the darkness. To the heart of the mountain. The sacred chamber where the first wolves made their pact with the moon. The passage was ancient, the walls carved with symbols that seemed to glow faintly as they passed. Nova could feel power here, old and deep, resonating with her own in a way that made her skin prickle. The passage opened into a vast cavern lit by bioluminescent crystals that grew from the walls and ceiling, casting everything in an ethereal blue glow. In the center of the cavern was a pool of water so still it looked like glass reflecting the crystals above like a mirror of stars. Solomon stood beside the pool as if he had been waiting for them, and he looked older than ever, his face lined with fatigue, but his eyes were clear and determined. "You've brought them," he said to Magnus. "Good. The hunters have breached the walls," Magnus said without preamble, "and Nova's sister is with them." Solomon's expression didn't change, but Nova saw his hands tighten slightly on his staff. "Luna," he said softly. "Her name is Luna." "You knew," Nova said, stepping forward. "You knew I had a sister, that she was alive, that she was with the hunters." "Yes," Solomon admitted. "I knew. Lyra brought her to me when the hunters closed in. She begged me to keep the child safe. But before I could get them to a secure location, Pierce found us. He killed Lyra. He would have killed the child too, but I convinced him of her value, that a moon blessed, raised among hunters, could be a powerful weapon." "You gave her to them?" Nova's voice rose in disbelief and anger. "I saved her life," Solomon corrected, "and positioned myself to watch over her, to influence her when I could, to remind her of her true nature, even as Pierce tried to twist her into something monstrous. And now she helps them hunt us," Magnus said, his voice hard. "Not willingly," Solomon replied. "Pierce controls her through fear and dependency. He is the only family she has ever known. But she is not lost. Not completely." Another explosion closer this time shook dust from the cavern ceiling. "We don't have time for this," Magnus said. "Solomon, why did you bring us here? What is this place?" "The Pool of Awakening," Solomon said, "where the first wolves came to commune with the moon spirit, where the moon blessed were first granted their powers." "How does that help us now?" Nova asked. "Because here at the source of your power, you can call to your sister. Reach her across the bond that connects you. Show her the truth of who she is, who you both are. And if she doesn't listen," Magnus asked, his arm tightening protectively around Caleb, "if she leads the hunters straight to us, then we die," Solomon said simply. "But if she does listen, if she turns against Pierce, the hunters lose their greatest weapon." Nova looked at the pool, its surface unnaturally still, despite the tremors that continued to rock the mountain. "What do I need to do?" "Kneel at the edge of the pool," Solomon instructed. "Place your hands in the water. Focus on the bond, the connection you felt in the forest. Call to her with your mind, your heart, your soul." Nova did as he said, kneeling at the water's edge. The moment her fingertips touched the surface, power surged through her far stronger than what she had experienced in the training clearing. It was as if the mountain itself was feeding her strength, amplifying her abilities beyond anything she had imagined possible. She closed her eyes and focused on that faint connection she had felt before that whisper across her mind. Sister. Luna. The other half of herself, separated at birth but bound by blood and magic. "Luna," she called, projecting the thought outward. "I know who you are, what you are. My sister, my twin, the other half of my soul." For a long moment there was nothing. Then, like a candle flaring to life in a dark room, she felt a presence. Cautious, fearful, but undeniably there. "Nova," came the response, so clear it could have been spoken aloud. "He told me you would try to trick me. Pierce lied to you." Nova pushed images across the connection. The photograph of them as infants, the letter from their grandmother, the journal entries describing how they were separated for their safety. "We are moon-blessed, the last of our kind, hunted almost to extinction by the very man who raised you." Doubt flickered across the connection. "He said our parents were killed by wolves, that he saved me." "Our parents died of protecting us from hunters," Nova corrected. "Our grandmother died the same way. Pierce is using you, Luna, using your power against your own kind. He is the only family I have ever known." Luna's mental voice was pained, conflicted. "No." Nova poured all her emotion, all her conviction into the connection. "I am your family, your twin, your blood. Feel the truth of it, Luna. Feel it in your soul." The connection between them strengthened, suddenly blazing like a bonfire. Nova gasped as images flooded her mind, seeing through Luna's eyes. A childhood of rigorous training, of constant fear, of desperate attempts to please the stern man who controlled every aspect of her life, of power suppressed and channeled into weapons against her own kind. And beneath it all, a loneliness so profound it made Nova's heart ache. "You don't have to be alone anymore," Nova whispered into the connection. "Come to me, sister. Come home." She felt Luna's resolve waver, felt the first cracks in a lifetime of conditioning. But then fear spiked through the connection. "He's here. He knows something's wrong. The connection snapped like a rubber band stretched too far, leaving Nova gasping and disoriented. She opened her eyes to find Magnus kneeling beside her, his face concerned. "What happened?" he asked. "Pierce. He interrupted us. He sensed what was happening." Nova struggled to her feet, sudden urgency driving her. "We need to go up. Now. Luna needs help." "Up," Magnus shook his head. "The hunters are up there. We're safer here." "Luna is fighting Pierce," Nova insisted. "I felt it, but she can't do it alone. She needs me." Solomon stepped forward. "She's right. If Luna has begun to resist Pierce's control, this could be our only chance. The two moon-blessed together would be powerful enough to turn the tide. Or it could be a trap," Magnus countered, "drawing us out into the open." Nova grabbed his arm. "Magnus, I know she's telling the truth. I felt it. Please trust me." Magnus looked at her for a long moment, then at his son. Caleb, who had been silent through all of this, suddenly spoke. "She's good," the boy said quietly. "The white-haired lady. She protected me from the others. Told me stories while I was captive. She's scared, but she's good." Magnus's expression softened. He touched his son's cheek gently, then nodded once decision made. "Very well, but Caleb stays here with Solomon." "No," Caleb protested, surprising them all. "I want to help." "You will help by staying safe," Magnus said firmly. "I cannot fight if I am worried about you." Caleb looked like he might argue further, but Solomon placed a gnarled hand on the boy's shoulder. "You can help me prepare the ancient rites, in case they are needed." The boy hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Magnus turned to Nova. "Let's go." They took a different passage from the cavern, one that Solomon assured them would bring them up near the main courtyard where the fighting was most intense. As they climbed, Nova could feel the conflict above growing closer, the sounds of battle echoing down the stone corridor. "If your sister has truly turned against Pierce, the hunters will be in disarray," Magnus said as they hurried upward. "But we need to be prepared for the possibility that this is all part of their plan." "It's not," Nova said with certainty. "Luna was raised by them, but she is moon-blessed. The bond between us is stronger than whatever Pierce has done to her." They emerged into chaos. The main courtyard of the fortress was a battlefield. Northern Crown warriors, in their wolf forms, engaging with hunter soldiers armed with silver weapons. The air was thick with silver gas, forcing many of the wolves back into human form, making them vulnerable to conventional weapons. Nova scanned the melee, searching for that distinctive white hair that would match her own. There at the center of the courtyard, two figures locked in combat. One was Commander Pierce, his face contorted with rage, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. The other was a young woman with white silver hair, her movements quick and precise, her eyes glowing with the same power that Nova now possessed. Luna. Even as Nova watched, Pierce caught Luna with a vicious backhand that sent her sprawling. He stood over her, a silver blade in his hand. "You ungrateful bitch," he spat. "After everything I've done for you, I should have left you to die with your whore of a grandmother." Nova didn't think. She acted. Power surged through her, the spirits answering her call without hesitation. The ground between Pierce and Luna erupted, spectral wolves rising from the stone, their forms translucent, but their teeth and claws very real. Pierce stumbled back, eyes wide with shock and recognition. "Another one," he breathed. "It's true, there are two of you." "There have always been two of us," Nova said, stepping forward, the spirit wolves flanking her. "And you will never hurt my sister again." Luna looked up from where she had fallen, her eyes wide with wonder and recognition. Through their bond, Nova could feel her sister's emotions, a chaotic mix of fear, hope, and fierce joy at seeing her twin for the first time. Pierce's shock gave way to calculation. Two moon-blessed, twice the power to harness, twice the weapons for our cause. We are not your weapons, Luna said, rising to her feet. Blood trickled from her split lip, but her eyes burned with determination. We are not yours to control. Everything you are is because of me, Pierce snarled. I raised you, I trained you, I made you strong. You made me a slave, Luna countered. You used me to hunt my own kind. No more. She moved to stand beside Nova, and the moment they touched, power exploded between them, a surge so strong it made the very air crackle with energy. Their hands clasped white light, spreading up their arms across their bodies until they stood together in a nimbus of pure moonlight. Through their bond, memories flowed freely. Nova shared her childhood with their grandfather, the safety and love she had known despite her supposed weakness. Luna shared the brutal training, the isolation, the constant fear of failure that had been her life with Pierce. And beneath it all, the sense that they had always been searching for each other, always been incomplete without their other half. Pierce must have sensed the danger because he barked an order into his communication device. All units converge on my position. Silver Protocol Alpha. Repeat, Silver Protocol Alpha. Hunters began to move toward them, weapons raised. Magnus, Nova called, not taking her eyes off Pierce. Get your people back. This is about to get dangerous. Magnus didn't argue. He shifted forms, his massive silver wolf body appearing in an instant, and let out a howl that echoed across the courtyard. The Northern Crown wolves began to retreat, pulling back toward the fortress walls. It doesn't matter how powerful you think you are, Pierce said, his hand moving to a device at his belt. We've prepared for this contingency. This fortress will be your tomb. He pressed a button and explosions rocked the mountain far larger than the previous ones. The ground beneath their feet trembled and cracks appeared in the courtyard stone. He's collapsing the mountain, Luna gasped. He'd rather kill everyone than let us go free. Nova felt a flicker of fear, but it was quickly replaced by determination. Then we stop him. Together. They raised their joined hands and the power between them intensified, channeling into the spirit wolves. The spectral creatures grew larger, more solid, until they were as real as any living wolf, their eyes glowing with ancient power. Attack, Pierce commanded his men. Kill them all. The hunters opened fire, but the bullets passed harmlessly through the spirit wolves. The creatures leaped forward, tearing through the hunter ranks with supernatural speed and strength. Not killing, Nova realized, but disarming, disabling, driving the humans back. Pierce saw his advantage disappearing and made a desperate move. He lunged forward, its silver blade aimed at Luna's heart. Time seemed to slow. Nova saw the blade coming, felt Luna's spike of fear through their bond. Without conscious thought, she pulled her sister behind her, placing her own body in the path of the blade. The silver edge sliced into her side, burning like acid. She gasped in pain, but remained standing, her hands still clasped with Luna's. Nova, Magnus's roar of rage cut through the chaos as he bounded toward them, a blur of silver fur and fury. Pierce had no time to react before the massive wolf was on him, jaws closing around his throat. But Magnus did not kill him. Instead, he pinned the hunter leader to the ground, snarling, waiting for the command from his queen. Nova looked down at the man who had caused so much suffering, who had twisted her sister's life into a weapon, who had hunted their kind to the edge of extinction. Kill him, Luna urged, her voice tight with decades of pain. After everything he's done, he deserves to die. Nova felt the temptation of it, the easy justice of ending Pierce's life, but something deeper called to her. The wisdom of the spirits, perhaps, or simply her own nature. No, she said finally. Death would be too simple, too quick. She knelt beside Pierce, her wound painful but not fatal. Instead, you will live, Commander Pierce. Live with the knowledge that you failed, that the Moon Blessed still exist, that we are stronger than ever. She placed her hand on his forehead, calling on the deepest, oldest magic of her bloodline. But you will hunt our kind no more. Power flowed from her into Pierce's silver light, seeping into his skin, his eyes, his very being. When she pulled her hand away, his eyes were blank, unseeing. What did you do to him? Luna asked, kneeling beside her sister. I took his memories of the hunt, of us, of everything he knew about wolves. Nova swayed slightly, the effort and her wound taking their toll. He will live out his days as an ordinary man, with no knowledge of the harm he caused. Magnus released Pierce's throat and shifted back to human form, catching Nova as she stumbled. "You're injured," he said, his voice tight with concern. "It's not deep," Nova assured him, though the silver burn was agonizing. "The other hunters, retreating," Magnus confirmed. "Your spirit wolves were convincing." Luna knelt beside them, her face a mirror of Nova's own, etched with concern. "Let me help," she said, placing her hand over Nova's wound. Silver light glowed between her fingers, and the pain began to recede, the flesh knitting together under her touch. "How did you—" Nova began. "Pierce taught me to use my power to harm," Luna said quietly. "I taught myself to use it to heal. A small rebellion, but it kept me sane." The mountain shook again, more violently this time. "The charges he set," Magnus said grimly. "They're destabilizing the entire fortress." "We need to get everyone out," Nova said, struggling to her feet with Magnus's help. "The evacuation tunnels may already be compromised," Magnus finished. "We need to stabilize the mountain itself." Luna looked at Nova, sudden understanding passing between them. "Together," she said, "like the old stories. The moon blessed could command the very earth." Nova nodded, taking her sister's hand once more. "We need to go back to the Pool of Awakening, the heart of the mountain. From there we can channel enough power to heal these wounds." Magnus looked between them, then nodded sharply. "I'll organize the evacuation, get as many out as possible. You two do whatever you can to buy us time." He kissed Nova fiercely, then turned and began shouting orders to the remaining warriors. The twins made their way back to the hidden passage, descending swiftly to the sacred cavern where they had left Solomon and Caleb. When they arrived, they found Solomon kneeling at the edge of the pool, chanting in an ancient language, with Caleb beside him repeating the words with perfect pronunciation, despite never having heard them before. Solomon looked up as they entered, his eyes widening at the sight of the twins together. "Luna," he breathed, "you came." "Not for you, old man," Luna said, her voice cool. "For her, for the truth." "The mountain is falling," Nova interrupted. "Pierce set charges. We need to stabilize it from here, from the source of our power." Solomon nodded, rising to his feet. "The ritual we were preparing, it can channel the power of the moon blessed into the mountain itself, strengthen its foundations." "Show us," Nova said. Solomon guided them to opposite sides of the pool. "Join hands across the water," he instructed. "Let your power flow between you through the pool into the mountain." The twins did as he said, reaching across the still surface of the water until their fingertips touched. The moment they connected, power surged between them, far stronger than before. The pool began to glow with a silver light that spread outward, flowing into the walls of the cavern, up through the veins of crystal that networked throughout the mountain. Nova could feel the damage Pierce had done, the weakened supports, the fracturing stone. Through the bond with Luna, she directed their shared power, mending, strengthening, stabilizing. The mountain shuddered once more violently and then gradually stilled. The twins maintained the connection, pouring more power into the wounded stone until they felt it settle solid and secure once more. When they finally released each other's hands, both were pale with exhaustion, but triumphant. "You did it," Solomon said, awe in his voice. "You healed a mountain." "We did what we were born to do," Luna said quietly. "What you should have taught me from the beginning." Solomon's face fell. "I did what I could to keep you alive, to guide you when possible." "It wasn't enough, I know." "No," Luna agreed. "It wasn't, but it's done now." Caleb approached them cautiously, his eyes wide with wonder. "You stopped the mountain from falling," he said. "You saved everyone." Nova smiled at the boy. "That's what family does. They protect each other." The word family hung in the air, resonating with meaning for all of them. Luna looked at her twin, then at Caleb, then at the cavern around them. "What happens now?" she asked. "Pierce is defeated, but there are other hunters. They won't stop coming for us." "No," Nova agreed. "They won't, which means we need to be ready for them, to build something stronger than what they can tear down." Magnus appeared at the entrance to the cavern, his face lighting with relief at the sight of them all safe. "The mountain has stabilized. Whatever you did, it worked." He crossed to Nova, taking her hand in his, then looked at Luna. "You fought against your own people today. You helped save my son, my pack. The Northern Crown is in your debt." Luna shook her head slightly. "They were never my people, just my captors." She glanced at Nova. I'm only beginning to understand what my people truly are. Nova squeezed her sister's hand. Stay, she said simply. Stay and help us rebuild. Help us protect our kind. Help me understand these powers we share. Luna hesitated. I've done terrible things, Nova. Helped hunt wolves. Helped Pierce develop weapons against them. And now you can help undo that damage, Nova countered. Together we're stronger than either of us alone. We were always meant to find each other, to stand together. Magnus stepped forward. Luna of the moon blessed, I offer you sanctuary in the Northern Crown Pack. Not as a guest, but as family. As sister to my mate aunt, to my son, protector of our people. Luna looked around at them all, Nova, her newly discovered twin, Magnus the Alpha King who had offered his protection, Caleb the quiet watchful child, and Solomon the complicated old wolf who had both betrayed and protected her. For the first time in her life, she felt something like belonging. Yes, she said finally, I will stay. The rebuilding began the next day. The damage from the hunter attack was extensive, but with the twins working together, channeling their power through the mountain itself, progress was swift. Walls were mended stone, regrown stronger than before. Luna's knowledge of hunter tactics and technology proved invaluable, allowing Magnus to strengthen the fortress's defenses against future attacks. The surviving hunters had retreated, their leader rendered harmless. But everyone knew this was only a respite, not a final victory. 2 weeks after the attack on the night of the full moon, Magnus called the entire pack to the main courtyard. They gathered in a circle with Magnus, Nova, Luna, and Caleb at the center. Tonight, Magnus's voice carried easily across the silent crowd. We celebrate not only our survival, but our rebirth. The Northern Crown Pack has faced its greatest challenge and emerged stronger. He turned to Nova, taking her hand. Tonight I claim Nova of the Moon blessed as my mate, my queen, and your alpha female. A cheer rose from the assembled wolves, far more enthusiastic than Nova had expected. In 2 short weeks, she had won their respect with her courage, her power, and her compassion. Magnus then turned to Luna. And I welcome Luna of the Moon blessed as blood kin to the alpha pair guardian of our future protector of our legacy. Another cheer, though slightly more reserved. Luna was still an unknown to many, her hunter past a source of wariness. But Nova could see respect in their eyes, if not yet full acceptance. Finally, Magnus knelt before his son. And I named Caleb my son and heir, first of a new generation bridge between the old ways and the new. The boy stood straighter, pride and responsibility settling on his young shoulders. As the celebration began around them, Nova found a moment alone with Luna at the edge of the courtyard. Are you happy? She asked her twin. With this new life, Luna considered the question seriously. Happy is not a word I've had much use for, she admitted, but I feel right, like I'm finally where I belong, with you, with our kind. She hesitated, though I'm not sure everyone feels the same about my presence here. They will, Nova assured her, in time, as they come to know you as I do. Luna smiled slightly. Through a mystical twin bond that lets you see into my very soul. Through actions that speak louder than any bond, Nova corrected. You fought for them. You helped save them. They won't forget that. Magnus approached Caleb at his side. The moon is at its zenith, he said. It's time for the final ceremony. The 4 of them made their way to the highest tower of the fortress, where Solomon waited beside a silver basin filled with clear water. The old wolf looked frailer than ever, as if the events of recent weeks had drained the last of his strength, but his eyes were bright with satisfaction. The moon blessed have returned, he said as they approached. The circle is complete once more. The ritual was simple but profound. Each of them placed a drop of blood in the silver basin, which Solomon then raised to catch the direct light of the full moon. The water gleam then began to glow with the now familiar silver light that marked the power of the moon blessed. Solomon spoke words in the ancient language, then offered the basin to each of them in turn. As they drank, Nova felt the power within her settling, strengthening, becoming more a part of her than ever before. But more than that, she felt the bonds between them solidifying. Her connection to Magnus, deep and passionate. Her link to Luna, the other half of her soul. Her growing attachment to Caleb, who looked at her now with trust and hope rather than suspicion. Family, pack, home. Words that had meant nothing to her 2 weeks ago now defined her very existence. Later, as they stood on the balcony of what was now their shared chambers, Magnus wrapped his arms around Nova from behind his chin, resting on her head as they looked out over the moonlit mountains. Happy, he asked, echoing the question she had posed to Luna earlier. Nova leaned back against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her spine. More than I ever imagined possible, though our challenges are far from over. The hunters will regroup, Magnus agreed, and there will be other threats, but we face them together now. All of us. Nova thought of how far she had come. From the rejected Omega kneeling in the snow, waiting to die to the queen of the most powerful wolf pack in the Northern Territories. From a woman who believed herself broken to one who understood her true strength. From a rejected Omega to the queen of wolves, she said softly. But the real power isn't what I can do to enemies. It's what we can build together. Magnus turned her in his arms, his silver eyes reflecting the moonlight. And what will we build, my queen? Nova smiled, touching his face gently. A legacy. A future where no wolf needs to fear hunters or ancient, cruel traditions. A world where our son can grow up in peace. Our son, Magnus raised an eyebrow, though she could feel his pleasure through the bond. Caleb needs a mother, Nova said simply, and I find I need him just as much. Magnus kissed her, then sealing this new promise between them. When they parted, he looked out over the mountains once more. A legacy, he repeated thoughtfully. Built on strength, yes, but also on wisdom, on compassion, on family. The bloodline legacy, Nova agreed. Stronger than any one of us alone. In the room next to theirs, Luna stood on her own balcony, feeling the moon's light on her skin, reveling in the freedom to embrace it rather than hide from it. In the courtyard below, she could see Caleb sitting with the other pack children, telling them a story with animated gestures. For the first time in her life, she was not a weapon. She was not alone. She was part of something greater than herself, something worth protecting. The legacy begins, she whispered to the moon, and it will not end with us.